Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson.
And I'm Matt Lilly.
And we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started. All right, Scott Schwenk was on the show. He's a meditation teacher, a master coach, a mindful alchemist. And we started this conversation with me. You know, I've always wanted to get more mindful, but like I said, I never really, I feel like I need to do more, but I get frustrated and I just kind of stop and I go back to my old ways. So I really appreciated him kind of talking and giving me some tactical tips, to at least a foundation, a starting point. What did you think about the conversation?
I agree. It was very, I liked his tips and technique into making it more simple to meditate. I think I hear that a lot. I think about it often too. It's like, how do you meditate? And there's, how do you become mindful? I was even listening to a monk, a Catholic monk, talk about Matthew in the New Testament, and he was talking about meditation and what that looked like from a Christian perspective. So there's 7 billion people on the earth. There's 7 billion ways to meditate, right?
Right.
But I thought Scott did a good job of giving some really practical, easy to do, not complex ways to just quiet down the mind, quiet down the noise. So I really appreciated his perspective on that. And then he has obviously lots of great resources on his website. He's a teacher, so he teaches lots of different courses.
Yeah, my big takeaway too is that he wanted to get across that this whole inner work or the whole, we make it way more complicated than we need to. It doesn't need to be perfect, right?
Yep.
It doesn't need to be painful,
right?
And he really shared with us he really opened up about some of his personal life, which I really appreciated, because it's a theme that comes up time and time again in these shows, that like, hey, look, we're talking about this stuff. Yeah, I'm an expert at this. I do this. I have a story, but I'm just like you. I still struggle with this on a day-to-day basis. That comes up time and time again. I think that's a theme of Next Level Method, right? That we want people to understand that you're never going to reach a plateau, plant a flag, and say, I've arrived. But you can certainly become more, you can have tons of powerful tools. And that's what I look at Scott. He gives us tons of powerful tools to get us on this path towards mindfulness. So I really appreciated the show.
Yeah, I did as well.
Hey, go check us out at nextlevelmethod.com, where you can learn more about everything that we're coming up to, especially with the year 2022 coming up, the live events that are coming up, and all the great guests and the relationships and the connections that we're getting on this show. And we really do appreciate you in this early stage being a fan of the show. Follow us on your favorite podcast application. That would mean the world to us. It does wonders in this sea of 2.7 million podcasts to get more noticed. It helps when you follow us, when you write a review. If you're finding some value, we really would appreciate it. So let's get on with this great conversation with Scott Schwenk here on Next Level Method. Scott, we're so excited to have you on the show. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, I'm intrigued because as I was telling you in the pre-recording, as a frustrated but willing student of inner work, of mindfulness, of meditation, I mean, I've dabbled in, as I was telling you in the pre-recording. I've definitely like being in that space. I've probably got waist deep. I've probably never been neck deep, because I get frustrated. I think, I'm probably making it more difficult than I need to, but I don't know. I mean, it just, as someone who wants to do it, and I'm looking at, and I know Matt, you're well more involved in this than I've been, but it's been kind of a frustrating endeavor for me. I don't know.
Meditation in
general. Can you name the frustration?
Yeah, I think, and I have gotten over this. Starting with meditation, let me start there, because that was probably the first thing I probably dipped my foot in, right? And quieting the mind, and even trying to help my family members quiet their mind. I mean, as a professional aviator, I'm always compartmentalizing. So I do work to try to, when situations are maybe stressful around me, both in the aviation setting and a professional setting, I'm a big proponent of being a composed force in a chaotic situation. So that does lead to this kind of mindfulness state to get there, to compartmentalize. But if I'm get myself, in the middle of the night, and it's quiet, and I'm laying down and the day's over, and I'm trying to go to a place of gratitude, it's hard for me to quiet the mind. It's hard for me to not look at the drunk monkey double fisting, 2 beers, as I'm trying to focus on what I'm grateful for the day, how I want to attack tomorrow. I just get so sidetracked, and I can't shut the mind off. It's just like a never-ending tape.
Well, here's the thing. It can be a lot easier. And even advanced practitioners, advanced meditators, don't spend enough time physically relaxing the body. Mm-hmm. So it's important to remember we're in an animal body. It's got a nervous system, and each nervous system has a past. And we're just starting at least at the edges of the developmental curve, to learn about trauma, particularly developmental trauma. All these things that happened as we were kids that were acceptable because they were prolific, happening all over the place. You know, when I was a kid in the 70s, corporal punishment from your parents was a normal thing. Getting spanked or slapped or whatever was just part of the deal. Now you can get sent to jail for that. So there's a lot of things that happened in our experience that we didn't realize. You know, years ago I would have told you, oh, I had a happy childhood. And that's actually not true. I had happy moments in my childhood. I have a lot to be grateful for in my childhood. And there were a lot of things that happened that I've realized with my learning about developmental trauma that imprinted me, conditioned the way I see myself in life and how I think and respond, especially when it comes to sitting down for meditation. You know, when you sit down for so-called meditation, formal, informal, laying on your back, you're just meeting where you are.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest frustrations for somebody trying to do a practice is to try to quiet the mind. Because what you're actually focusing on is the noise, so you're reifying the noise. You're actually adding energy
To the noise.
to the part you want to quiet.
Yeah.
You remember those bank doors? At certain banks, there was two sets of doors, and there's like a chamber, an entrance chamber, an antechamber, and there's security doors. So once you enter the first set of doors, you're in the chamber. But until the outer door closes, the inner door will not open. It's locked. It's like that. Until the outer door closes, the inner door won't open. Going to give you another analogy because you talked about the double fisting monkey. There's a known thing in the East about how to catch a monkey. So you get some chickpeas and you throw them in the bottom of a pitcher that's got a somewhat narrow neck.
Yeah.
Just wide enough for the monkey to get his fist or his hand down there. Once the monkey, he or she, gets their hand down there, they grab the chickpeas and they make a fist. And they're not going to let them go because they're so attached to the chickpeas. So you've caught yourself a monkey.
Right.
This is what we do. So what we don't realize we're doing, and it takes time and practice to notice it, to create enough relaxation in the body to be able to see from a wider perspective while I'm sitting still what I'm actually doing. And what I'm actually doing, if I'm honest, most of us, is I'm focusing on a problem while focusing on the solution. The outer door is not closed. As long as I'm focused on the condition called problem, I'm not available to the shift in my nervous system called solution.
Okay.
So if you could consider that meditation is no longer a place for you to get high, to seek high.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, if you want to get high, live in a state where it's recreationally legal.
Right.
But beyond that, it's a place to train. It would be a little bit like getting mad at a child who's 5 years old for not doing advanced calculus perfectly. There's stages that child has to go through developmentally and in the brain, like forming the prefrontal cortex, for example, to be able to do abstract math. The brain and the nervous system need to go through sequential stages of development where it then becomes natural to notice, oh, there's space between any two thoughts, and it's always here. So the hack I want to give you, this is the long way around to that. Number one, relax the body. And I teach it through what I call the 6 points of softening. If you imagine softening these 6 places in the body like you're opening a fist with your mind, everything in between begins to progressively soften, and the mind stream starts to slow down naturally. And they work really, really well as pairs if you want to try it with me briefly. So just imagine softening the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands like you're opening fists with your mind. And just make it up that it's easy. And let your breath come in a little deeper and let it go out a little slower. And as you get the hang of that feeling, you sense the softening. Now, soften all 4 corners of your eyes, the inside and outside corners, like butter melting on a hot day, as well as the region inside and around your ears. Again, just make it up that it's easy. It's just the general feeling of softening. You're likely to feel a little release across your forehead or maybe jaw tension starting to go on its own. And then the last pair is soften your tongue as it sits in the floor of your mouth. As it relaxes into the floor of your mouth, soften your tongue from end to end while you soften all those little muscles of the whole pelvic floor groin region area, PC, sphincter, all that soft. So you're softening soles, palms, corners of the eyes, region of the ears, tongue, and pelvic floor groin region. Just letting go on the exhales and kind of receiving, have that feeling to appreciatively receive nourishment on the inhales. Now the next piece of this is the longer and the slower you make your exhales, the more the mind stream is going to slow down. And just notice how that feels first before we talk about space between thoughts. Just notice how that feels. There's a little more space.
Yeah.
Right? And then, if you're looking at like the show notes you have on your paper, there's white space around the letters and words that makes the words and letters distinguishable, right? Mm-hmm. The mind is actually this way. So you can actually playfully shift your attention. There's a space between the words and the thoughts in your mind. And as you just touch it briefly, don't try and grasp it, don't try and extend it, that's stress. Just notice it briefly, let it go, and notice it again as you continue to soften the body and slow your exhales. And if that's all you do for 20 minutes, or starting with 5, you're carving the new neural pathways in your brain for it to get easier and easier and easier every single time you practice.
Yeah.
You do this for the next 30 days, it's going to add up. It just is. And it gets easier and easier and easier. Another simple access point usually that we start with before the space between thoughts, because that can seem really abstract. Mind wants to think about the space between thoughts in words, which is more thoughts. There's a gap. You know, when we were kids, maybe you still get on it, if you're lucky, get on a swing set. And there's a moment when the swing reaches its peak, and there's a brief pause before it goes the other direction. This is the breath. There's a pause between the inhale and the exhale, and if you just notice it and lightly let it go, maybe a microsecond or two longer, and just relax into it, like you're relaxing into your couch after a hard day's work well done, the gap will start to extend itself naturally, and it is a thought-free gap. Brief, but thought-free. And the more you notice it, the more you notice it. Like you buy a red car, suddenly it seems like everybody bought a red car in your town.
Right.
They were already there.
Yeah. It's just turning up it's just noticing it, right? No, I really appreciate that. I like that. I like all of that. I mean, I've never kind of been approached that way. The tactical kind of simple, I don't mean that in an insulting way, but the tactical simplicity behind it. That's the words I'm looking for. Yeah.
100%. You know, where the tradition that I was raised in, which is, the fancy term would be non-dual tantra. Non-dual meaning not two. There's an understanding from this first pithy sutra. Sutra is like a really condensed understanding in a few words. And it's from a text called the Pratyabhijna Hridayam, the heart of the teachings on realizing our true nature. It's only 20 sutras. And Sutra 1, the first sutra of any of these texts always contains the highest truth and the whole thing, and then they unpack it. So Sutra 1 says, Chittihi swatantra vishvasidehetuhu. Chittihi swatantra vishvasidehetuhu. Consciousness, capital C, of its own free will, manifests temporarily as all objects and beings and possibilities. Sutra 2, Swechaya swabhito vishvaman milyati. She's projecting this storyline like a movie onto a screen in the theater. So this consciousness, which is you and I, is the story, is the actors, is the camera, is the projector and the screen. It's all of it. One something that we really can't name is manifesting as everything. If you want to go in through, string theory, you can go in that way and find it that way. But basically, there's one something manifesting temporarily as everything. And at some point, through entropy, the forms dissolve, but whatever it's made out of never goes away. It can become anything. You think about plants in the garden. The visible plant dies, seemingly, but then it can sprout up again from the seed.
Well,
So this understanding can make it a little easier. The enlightened awareness, whatever that really is, the fullest blown consciousness of what we are, what life is already here or not at all. And it's covered up. And it's covered up by information stored in the nervous system. And three main types. One holds the other two together, gives rise to them. The first one is this sense of being flawed. The feeling of being flawed, bad, wrong, insufficient in some way. And we all live with it in one way or another. And it can get stimulated through somebody looking at you some funny way, or a bank balance that you glance at. And then we contract. And that contraction is what's covering up the recognition that we're already whole and complete. And all the love and joy we seek is in that completeness. And then that gives rise, that feeling of being insufficient, naturally gives rise to the feeling of being separate from others, from whatever we think source is. And then if we think we're separate, I think we've got to do something about everything. So this idea of being the doer, the separate agent, having to make things happen in order to get a particular experience of happiness, love, stillness. So coming full circle to the mind and wanting to experience the quiet, stop trying to manufacture quiet and just assume that quiet is already there. And sit long enough with relaxing and long, slow breath and let the quiet emerge into the foreground. It will. The more you try, the more you close it off.
Right.
Shut it down, push it away.
Which is with everything. That's right. Yeah. I love that. Knowing that the quiet, just know that the quiet is already there. It's just it's not my job to manifest the quiet or manufacture the quiet. It's to let it naturally emerge because it's already there. Right. I think that's a more abundant way to look at it. It's not,
but that's exactly right. There's this movement in part of the zeitgeist called the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an unfortunate yet clear name for a whole group of laws or observations of habits of how energy seems to work in the universe, alchemical laws. I prefer to call them habits because we don't know for certain that they're forever. Rhythm, polarity, neutralization, vibration. Everything vibrates, everything moves. But the point is, we tend to miss out on what we want, like love. Who doesn't want more love, really? The experience of love. And when I look for it out there and I'm trying to get it, I'm chasing, I'm clinging, I'm grasping. It's like swimming after a beach ball in the pool. The harder I swim, the more I push it away because it's not out there.
Yeah.
Right now, just get a memory of having felt real love, like real love. Maybe it's your kid or somebody's kid or an animal, a place in nature. Like, get a real memory until you begin to feel some sensation in that memory. And right now, nobody's pouring love on your head like an object. It's arising within. It always does.
Yeah.
It's already there, and there's tremendously more, infinitely more.
Yeah. That's with everything in life, right? It's like you already have a lot of the tools, most of the tools to be fulfilled, successful, significant, living a life of consequence already. It's all within you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that, to me, that is the task, is like, how do you unleash it? Or let it come out naturally. Unleash may be the wrong way to look at it, but
when you say that, I'm always curious when we have guests on the show. I'm always curious at what point, we're seeing kind of a polished Scott today, right? To some whatever degree, right?
Oh yeah.
But you talked about your childhood, reflecting back that there were happy moments, but you wouldn't describe it as a happy childhood. But at kind of what was the catalyst, I guess, for you of like wanting to know more about this? Did you naturally grow up in an environment that was kind of surrounded by this type of teaching, or was it something that you had to seek out?
I had to seek it out. And I was one of the kids who had a particular ability already open. And I could hear people's thoughts. It didn't seem count onable. I didn't know that's what was going on, and I figured everybody had it. So it just kind of seemed like the air I breathed. But I would find myself saying things that people were thinking, and they would say so. It was kind of really interesting and challenging, because basically how it was for me as a kid, I didn't know any of that was really going on. What I knew is I knew when adults were saying one thing and thinking another. And it would create stress in my body and discomfort and fear. And so it led me to seek. You know, as a little boy, how it manifested was being interested in magic. I had magic kits, and I wanted to go to magic shows, and that's how that went. And then as I got a little older, I started learning about things. The New Age movement was starting to kind of cut its teeth in a more obvious way, and bookstores were popping up. So I started reading everything I could get my hands on. You could say I was definitely going to go down this road no matter what. Nothing was going to get in the way.
Did you think, though, because, I mean, to Matt's point, was it for a seeking of happiness? It seems like everybody's kind of goes down this path of mindfulness or meditations or even breath work is because on the surface they seem, or they think, or they feel that they're unhappy. Is that,
yeah,
was that a catalyst for you? An unhappiness?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. My father, and I still to this day don't know what moved him to do it, because he wouldn't ever tell, cleaned out the bank accounts when I was somewhere around 5 or 6. My mother and I and he were in a new house. Didn't tell anybody, left town for 11 days, and originally had no intention of ever coming back. About 3 days in, I came downstairs to find my mom sitting alone in a flood of tears in the dark. And at that moment, I was suddenly all by myself. And that was a watershed moment for me that turned me into a fixer. There was already stuff going on behind closed doors that I could feel or hear from time to time. So a lot of it for me was overcoming the suffering of being around people who were emotionally dysregulated a lot of the time, and who were so occupied with their own unhappiness that I felt even more alone. And so this natural hunger for like closeness and happiness and love, I didn't think those things as a little boy. I just instinctively was like, something's not right and I want more. And that's really what pushed me for so long. It still does. It still does. I mean, my own mother passed away after a 12-year battle with cancer, October 14th, 2019. 6 months later, my dad, who hasn't been with my mom since I was 7, seemingly influenced by his fundamentalist Christian life, started gaslighting me on phone conversations, and when called out about it and asked about it, blamed it on my homosexuality. And when I wrote back about he's basically cut me off. He's left again. I haven't heard from him in a year and a half, and I don't know if I ever will. I've written to him a number of times, whatever's going on in his world. So I still have catalysts in my life that, for me, forced me to want to grow. You know, for a guy to fundamentally feel rejected by his father, not once, but multiple times, it's a big deal. And then to have to find some sort of healthy self-image. And I'm not gonna just meditate my way into that.
Right.
Right.
It also involves doing other forms of inner work to heal the nervous system, to learn how to regulate, to form a healthy attachment pattern.
And so something, this is all very curious. So something you mentioned pre-show was kind of, I think you'd use the term kind of what's showing up in the world today. So I guess, what's your opinion on what's happening in the world as far as an individual inner work, strife, turmoil, whatever you think's going on, and then kind of what's your approach to that, or what's your insight into that?
Well, I don't think we're dealing with anything terribly new on a kind of a meta level. What we're dealing with is we are not tuned into our source, and we're seeking happiness in the external world, and the external world is kind of a problem. We're faced with climate change, this obviousness that at the time of this recording, we're dealing with COVID surging again for a fourth wave in Germany, and them talking about major lockdowns coming back again. So there's this major sense of uncertainty. Well over 1 million people have died from being hospitalized around this virus. There was this river that moved in from the ocean. I'm not a weather meteorologist person, so I can't really speak technically, but this river last week moving through Seattle that moved up to Vancouver, like a river of water. They were underwater in portions of it. One of my clients, her house was the only one that had power. Like strange things are happening. So there's this sense, and then the destabilization of many governments around the world, or people's faith in the governments. So it's a post-truth age where people are like, how do I know what's true? The debates about vaccination, which I'm not going to take any side about, but people are really up in arms of should I, shouldn't I, hearing reports seemingly that seem true from both sides. So the cognitive dissonance, the confusion, some people it's pushing them down. Some people it's an instigator to seek out something more coherent, more sustainable, more uplifting. So that's what I see going on in the world.
How much of it, even on a personal level, how much of this is like Matt said, we're seeing this kind of Scott now that seems to be comfortable with who he is, comfortable, you seem happy.
I am.
And something like you deal with like recently as your father, right? I mean, the real things like that. How easy is it for you to kind of regress? Or did a regression happen and you pulled it back? Or were you always kind of at this solid state because of the work that you've done, because of the inner work that you did prior to, let's just take this example with your father.
Yeah.
Was there a regression and coming back, or was it like, man, I'm here with sword and shield at hand, and you kind of took some chinks in the armor, but you pretty much stood your ground? Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. There was a great teacher that you guys might have come across through some of the people you've interviewed or your own readings, Georg Gurdjieff, who was a Russian teacher of wakefulness in the last century. And one of the things he said that was pretty brilliant, he says, in any individual, there is a theater of selves, each one presenting as though it's the real I. Verify the eyes. Which eye is speaking, and is that the real I? And I say that as a preamble because I've got multiple impulses in me like everybody else does. So I've definitely experienced frustration, days when I've just, wanted to tell him to F off from some of the memories that have come up. I don't fully become that feeling, but I let it come up. I let myself feel it. I sit with it, and I hold a loving space around it the way I would want a loving mom or dad to hold space for me. I get in the mirror. I do regular mirror work. I'm finding that's incredibly, incredibly helpful and free to go stand in a mirror, eye gaze with myself the way I want to be seen by a good, loving person, and listen, and if need be, put hands on where I would want somebody back of my neck or on my chest or belly, and just be there, breathing slowly and metabolizing what I'm feeling. So am I always happy? No. I get caught up just like anybody else. I just know how to get back. The more I practice my tools, I can get back quicker.
And that's kind of what I was searching for, was because I think a lot of times we go through these, or we think, oh, if I do this work, I do this inner work, I'm going to reach this state of permanent whatever. like flag planting happens, and I don't think that's the reality, right? And so I appreciate that answer, because I think that's encouraging, that even though we do this inner work, I guess it's still a battle, and I always look at things. It's still I need to be prepared for that battle, right? And it sounds like doing the inner work, you were prepared, but it was still a battle. Is what I'm hearing in your answer.
It was a battle for a long time, and then I changed my context because a battle to me implied continually needing an adversary to fight.
Good point. Yeah.
And to have to use force.
Yeah.
So I've been shifting, and I continue to work with this because it's not a permanent, understanding. If I get triggered, I still have to shift into, you know what, let me love my way through instead of fight my way through.
I like that.
And let me learn how that works. What does it actually mean to love my way through in a way that I'm not dissociating from my feelings or my body or from the conversation that might be difficult with somebody? I'm right here. What do I need to do? And the first thing I come right back to is softening my body because it's counterintuitive. What do? We armor up. We tighten the belly. Just talking about this, some of you listening, your belly's tight. Just take a sweet breath into your belly and let it soften. Unless you're having a photo shoot for six-pack abs, let it soften. And notice how it's easier to listen from that place.
So I have a 6-year-old boy, and having a 6-year-old boy for me is wonderful because it's reminding me of all the time he's asking me like, how did you know to go do that, Dad? Like fun stuff. And it's like, because that's what I wanted to do at 6 years old. It's kind of, right. So I'm happy. So my mirror work involves basically when my wife and I are getting ready for bed, me standing in front of the mirror flexing like right, and just being super happy just to watch her reaction.
Hey, yeah.
And now I'm letting my hair grow out so I can get like Wolverine. Like some people have said, I kind of have a resemblance, or Hugh Jackman looks a little bit like me. And so I'll puff up my hair and I'll flex. But to your point about doing mirror work, I actually do really enjoy just the humor of myself making myself laugh. And I found that actually is very healthy versus worrying about, do I have a little too much tummy chub? Sure. Do I have, would I like to have this or this? But I just, with my 6-year-old, he's such a good mentor for me in that way, because it's just like, no, this is just who I am, and this is fun, and having fun with it versus making it. And we talked a little about that in pre-shows, not making it always so damn heavy, right? Like inner work. And I've done my fair share of Tony Robbins stuff and leadership stuff, master's degree type stuff, and also traveling to India and doing like studying with Hindu monks and really heavy stuff sometimes. But and I think that honestly, I think part of that is needed, those deeper dives and those more intentional trips, if you want to call those. But I think for the most part, how do we make it more fun? How do we make it something that we enjoy doing versus something that we're doing to avoid pain, I guess is my point. As far
practice. It's all practice. Whatever I'm practicing, I'm becoming more of.
Right.
And laughing is on top of the list of ways to tone up the most important cranial nerve in our body, known as the vagus nerve. This wandering nerve that moves from the sides of the neck down through the center of the chest, into the belly, into the gut. And it determines our sense of resilience and feeling uplifted or depressed, anxious, autoimmunity. And laughing is one of the top things, even if it seems forced, for toning up, that's the language, toning up the vagus nerve. A simple hack I've given out many times is take out a clock with a second hand, set it for a minute, and agree with yourself you'll laugh out loud for the entire minute. You are going to be in a different state at the end of that minute.
Right, yeah.
So here we are back again to the physiology, though, is the point I want to make. So much of our experience of inner state, because we are predominantly identifying our sense of self with our body and what's happening with it. So when we can shift using the body as an access, because it's the first reality we can encounter, we can touch it, then we start to notice there's a little more ease and flow, including diet. Inflammation stresses us out, and inflammation is prolific right now, whether it's caused by stress or diet or lack of exercise, and inflammation is the #1 cause of aging and disease. So getting inflammation down is going to actually make it easier to meditate.
Right.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Gundry on a couple months ago, and he's all about, and I know he's coming on the show here very soon in the next week or two. And he talks about that a lot, is inflammation in the body and what causes that. And if you've got dis-ease in the body, that's going to show up in the mind too, right? I mean, the mind's in the body, so, or at least the brain is. So, yeah, we've got to be mindful of what we're putting in our body, not just in our thoughts,
and
right?
we're not going to automatically, because somebody's listening right now, go, oh, I'm going to reduce inflammation. Yeah, well, great, excellent, and you may not feel better today, even though you've made the decision. So what about today, tomorrow, next week, and all the weeks in between while resolving inflammation? What do I do? Well, can I start to practice allowing things to be as they are while still taking action to improve them?
Yeah.
What do I mean is not fighting reality. You know, like if it's raining outside, for me to be mad about that is just to upset myself unnecessarily. It is raining. And I can either go out and dance in the rain or watch it and enjoy the sound or do something else, put noise canceling headphones on. But why argue with it? So if I've got a condition in the body, I've got some good friends going through some pretty intense things to include cancer. Arguing with reality is not going to make me feel better. Can I bring some level of acceptance like you bring to your 6-year-old? When your 6-year-old is feeling a little sad, you don't try and wring it out of him like a dish rag. You create a safe space for him to be the way that he is. And you know that if you create a safe space for him, not too tight, not too loose, it will resolve.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's us too.
Yeah, that's going. Well, that's what I was going to bring up. Like bringing up that situation with your father. Like I said, when I said, "Is this a battle, or are we regressing? Is it chinks in the armor?" It's like not beating ourselves up, or just appreciating the fact that, man, I really do want to tell this guy to F off right now. That's what I'm feeling right now, and just kind of sit with that and just recognize it for what it is. I think sometimes we like, oh, I'm in this mindfulness state, I'm doing all this work, I shouldn't be feeling. No, you should, because it warrants an FU, right? And so, but don't let that define that feeling. Just acknowledge it, but then understand that the emotionally mature side of yourself, or the emotionally intelligent side of yourself, says this feeling of telling this guy to F off isn't gonna get me to the place where I want to be, right? But at least
right.
at least acknowledge
it either.
Right? Don't suppress it. Acknowledge it for what it is. Sit with it a little bit, and that sitting with it a little bit allows you to get to the emotionally intelligent place of like, okay, this doesn't serve me, but this does. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I come back again and again to some of the current conversations like regulation, dysregulation. If those are new terms to you as a listener, regulation is basically like feeling like you can handle what's arising in your moments without freaking out.
Right.
And feel kind of together. And dysregulation is like, oh gosh, what? Oh, I feel all messed up. What do I do? I don't want to leave the house, or worse than that. In a perfect world, our parents were meant to co-regulate our nervous system until we could learn to regulate it ourselves. And a lot of us never learned how to regulate our own nervous system, how to self-soothe without suppressing anything. Mm-hmm. Anger has a lot of good information on it.
Right.
It's a passion. It's one of the passions, and it's a strong passion, and it's strong enough energy to ideally move through a block of some sort, even if it's imagined. To move through a block. So, what's the block I want to move through? My father isn't accepting me. Well, in the moment I'm focusing on that, am I accepting me?
Right.
Am I accepting me? What little movement could I make to me give myself right now the feeling I wish he was giving me? Because if I'm not giving it to me, it ain't going to happen.
Right. Right.
And if I am giving it to me more and more regularly, love, acceptance, encouragement, I'm carving these neural pathways for it to be normalized in my system as a behavior. And because we feel each other, everything is relating to everything, quantum entanglement, I'm more likely to attract people who will treat me in these new ways. Instead of holding on to this one person who's not currently wanting to be in my life, determining how I'm going to feel all day.
Right. Well, realizing that you're always at a choice. Matt and you and I have talked about that all the time, right? And we're big proponents of that. And just to me, that's the kind of the power of doing the inner work, is just realizing no matter what happens, no matter what you're presented with, that you're always at a choice. And to me, that is so empowering. It's so optimistic to me when I find myself in like kind of those spots where I do let it suppress me, or I do find myself wanting to go the revenge route, or I'll show you, or hang, if I can, I'm always at a choice. And nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can take that away from me.
Now, you and I both know there's moments when we cognitively know, because we've been talking about it for so long, oh, there's a choice, but it sure doesn't feel like that in the moment.
Right.
And I think it's a really interesting question. What do we do in those moments when our normal practices don't seem to be shifting our state? What do we do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the feelings sometimes aren't always the arbiters of truth, right? Or the arbiters of...
That's right. They're just letting us know how we're feeling.
Exactly. Right.
So then we come back to the breath. Come back to the breath. The breath, every emotion has a correlate breathing pattern. So if I want to feel differently, I can play with changing the rhythm and the depth of my breath. And if I'm willing to stick with it for a few minutes, I'm going to begin to feel some sort of a shift that'll give me inspiration to keep practicing, and maybe the intuition about something next, like, oh, I haven't eaten yet. My blood sugar is probably dropping. Let me have a snack and then reconsider the situation. And lo and behold, a different point of view opens up, or hydration, or going for a little walk.
I love it.
Nowhere in here did we talk about needing to learn complex Sanskrit mantras in order to feel better.
Right. I think that's what I think a lot of time people think when we try to go down this path, is like, oh my God, I got to, listen to these tantras. I got to find my, whatever my om is, or whatever,
Well, also this, if we're going to get really real about this, take the gloves off. And this is where, I try and tell on myself as much as possible as a teacher, so that people don't project, I've got it all figured out. How many well-known, well-branded teachers, or well-known before there was branding, were in happy, successful relationships? How many major yoga teachers, major spiritual teachers were in successful, happy partnerships?
I don't know. Do you know the answer?
Not very many.
Yeah.
Not very many that I've counted on. And here's why. Because the work of the East, this waking up work, tends to focus on leading people to the witness of the mind, this aspect of ourselves that can witness the mind. That part is not so great at relationship. And it's sort of dissociative if it's not worked with something else. So here's the deal. In the latest work on the stages of adult ego development, the work of Ken Wilber, Terry O'Fallon, Suzanne Cook-Greuter, where they're testing for what stage of ego development we're in. You can be very awake to the nature of supreme reality and have a very underdeveloped stage of ego development. And that underdeveloped stage of ego development is how you and I will interpret any spiritual, quote, experiences we're having. So a fundamentalist who has a peek at non-duality will say, oh, that was the hand of Allah, or that was Jesus, or that was, whatever it was. And it was because I belong to my group, my tribe.
Right.
I'm one of us, not one of them. Whereas somebody who's, this is kind of a big word, pluralist, somebody who's a pluralist, it goes, oh, there's many ways up the same mountain of waking up. Somebody who's further along starts to recognize that all religions, governments, monetary systems, educational systems are constructed. There was a time before they were. How can they be the ultimate truth? The ultimate truth has always existed, will never go out of existence. So how can one group, in words which are made up, have the corner of the market on the truth? But that can't be recognized as an embodied experience until that stage of development. It's just an idea that people have. It's an extrapolated idea. So these two movements need to happen at the same time. Waking up can happen at any stage of ego development. The stages are where we're going to find more happiness being in a body and getting along with other people. Relationship skills, attachment. What's my attachment style? That's starting to make its way into the conversation. I'm sure you guys are up on, are you an anxious, an avoidant, a secure, to name 3 of the major ones? Influenced by how we grew up with our mom and dad or primary caregivers. I grew up anxious. So I grew up needing, for decades, needing you to validate my worth. And it was never, ever, ever enough until I learned to start forming secure attachment strategies to validate myself for existing. Not for equality, just for existing. And to show up to the table kind of full, as it were, for a relationship, not needing you to give me what I'm not now giving myself. Without all that, it's actually upsetting to wake up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Good stuff.
So what do you spend your time focused on now? I know you're a teacher, it sounds like, and I went to your website. It looks like you have just tons of really impactful classes that you offer. So is that where you spend the bulk of your time, focused on working with people individually and in groups?
Yep, I do. I've got retreats. I taught at 1440 Multiversity for a few years before the pandemic up in the Santa Cruz area. I've just taught for the Omega Institute. I've got another Omega Institute retreat June 5th through the 10th. I've got teaching at this place called the Art of Living Center's Retreat Center at the ridge of the Blue Ridge Mountains in April, a 3-day workshop. I've got a pretty robust platform that you took a look at with classes that people can sign up for, including a 25-hour training for people who want to take their leadership development or their facilitation skills to a whole next level. And I do a lot of one-on-one master coaching.
Nice, beautiful.
Interesting. How can people connect with you? And we mentioned the website, other ways that people can connect with you?
Yeah, so the website is scottschwenk.com. Instagram is the social that I'm most active on, and it's the Scott Schwenk. Somebody else already got Scott Schwenk. It turns out there's a few of us out there. So the Scott Schwenk.
I'm glad I'm talking to the Scott Schwenk, because that's what I'm excited about.
And then the Commune platform. Commune is some good friends of mine now, and I've got 2 courses up there, a 5-day ecstatic breathwork course, and then last year we released this Abundant Joy course that can be taken as a 7-day or a 21-day course, and I'm about to film in January a new 10-day meditation course with Commune as well. Commune is an offshoot from the founders of Wanderlust, which was a global festival. So Jeff Krasno and some other partners formed this new company presenting filmed courses with all sorts of teachers, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, myself,
Very
Dr.
cool.
Mark Hyman, all sorts of stuff, yeah.
Well, you're doing great stuff, Scott, and I really appreciate the kind of I know for me, the tactical kind of, I love the simplicity of starting that place, right? And I'm a big proponent of that. And I know that it's more, I always make things more complicated than I need to, so I really do appreciate the kind of the tactical approach to just start with the body, start with those 4 points. And I really appreciated that. That's a good place to start, right?
6 points.
Six points. I'm sorry.
Souls, palms, eyes, ears, tongue, pelvic, floor. But you could start with 4. And if you only started with 2, if you only started with the soles and palms, that would be enough for a while. If you were we were radically softening soles and palms all day long, we're going to be more present.
Yeah.
And have more intuition online.
And that's the goal. Scott, thank you. Did we talk about everything? Did we talk about everything? We could talk for longer, but did we hit out all the high points that you hope to achieve?
We didn't talk as much about love as I always love to talk about. Love is the whole story.
It is.
When I was sitting in hospice with my mom at the end, 2 things became radically obvious. One was breath and the other was love. So breath, without breath, the body's a corpse, and how the breathing is happening determines how we feel. And then without love, what's the point? Really, what's the point? And when we begin to get good instructions to find love within, the whole game starts to change. The whole game starts to change, and we live differently. Wake up in the morning going, I'm going to practice love from the inside out today. I'm going to go get in the mirror, and I'm going to look at me the way I want to be looked at until it's easy.
Yeah, I I really do appreciate that, because I agree with you 100%. I mean, once you start looking at life through a love lens, it's completely different, right? And even to the point to where, like, how can I add value in a loving sense today? Even starting your day with that, like, what's the best way love can show up in me today and throughout me? I try to do.
And to remember that it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's not something like we have to manufacture it.
No,
the more we relax, easier.
And let it come. It's already there, right? Just like we were talking about earlier. It's one of those things that it's already there. You just got to find ways to let it come out.
Little kids are automatically loving.
Absolutely.
We unlearn because of social anxiety.
Yep.
We unlearn it, but it's like it's the most natural thing in us to love.
Yeah. Great way to end the show. I appreciate that, Scott.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thanks for coming on the show. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. Thanks for coming on.
Right on.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Next Level Method podcast. If you found some value in this, tell somebody about the show. Tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your kids, let them know all about Next Level Method. And go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn more and join our community. Thanks for tuning in.